Okay. My name is Lynn Craiginen, and I'm in the Mackin House parlour, and I'm very pleased to be talking to Denis and Marlene Wagner. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. Tell me a little bit about when you moved to Coquitlam and when that was and where you lived and what the neighbourhood was like then for you.
I moved from Alberta in 1949-50 at Christmas time. I was 12 years old at the time, and I ended the grade 6 off at Millside School. The following year, went up to Austin, which was a Coquitlam High School at that time, where the John B. and the Rona Lumber is now, and I finished off grade 7 there. Meanwhile, the new school was built up on King Edward, or was it Albert, and one or the other, and it was a Coleman Lake High School, and I finished there from grade 7 to grade 12. And what was the area like at that time? Well, there was a few stores along here, like thrifts across the way from the museum, and these buildings at that time was part of the Fraser Mills people who lived here, and all the houses were still down on the street here going to Fraser Mills. My father worked down there, and I worked down there on weekends in the plywood plant, and that was myself and many others' source of money during our teenage years going to high school. The fire hall at that time was right across the street from the museum, on the corner where now the complex is, apartments. What else was around here? Not too much, I suppose. Nelson at that time was still gravel. Rochester was gravel. The only paved streets that I recall at that time was Austin, Marmont, and Blue Mountain, and Burnett.
Would you tell them about wintertime, what you did in the wintertime?
Yeah, the year I moved over here in 1949-50, it was a very cold winter. They had to dynamite logs out of the river for Fraser Mills so that they could cut saw logs so they could cut them. And they closed Nelson Street off for sleigh riding, so for about 2 weeks we started up in Austin Road with our sleighs and went all the way down to Burnett. And they had the bottom end of Nelson gravel so the sleighs wouldn't go out onto Burnett and get ran over.
Oh my goodness.
So it was pretty cold that winter. When I came over, I was dressed for Alberta weather, and I don't know, I made sort of a hit, I guess, with the girls at school because of my moccasins and parkers and whatnot. But the boys didn't look up that way the same degree, so I had my fisticuffs for the first few months till I found my place.
No doubt. Okay. So when you went to Millside School, you said, Denis, that you were in grade 6.
Yes.
Describe what the school setting was like then and how big the school was, you know, what an average day maybe looked like.
If I recall properly, there was three classes of grade 6 with approximately 30. Was there 2 classes? Maybe it was 2 classes of grade 6. 2 classes with approximately 30 students in each class, and plus the basement, which was the cloakroom for the jackets and whatnot. And that was about it for the school.
Did your sister go there too?
Yes. Oh yeah, they had another a smaller school on the sidelines there for the elementary students. That's what they had. Yeah. So they had 2 schools, one a bigger one and one was smaller.
Can you remember what a school day looked like for you then?
I don't really know. I can't compare it because I did go to school many years later, so in elementary school, so I'm not too sure. It was certainly different from where I came from, because where I came from, it was a one-house schoolhouse with a horse barn and a pump and a couple outhouses and a wood stove to keep ourselves warm in the wintertime. So that was quite a difference moving from the country in Alberta to the school out here. So I really had to do some work to fit in, because I come from a completely different culture.
And how was that adjustment for you?
I found it a little difficult. I came from a trap line and hunting and whatnot to a city life which was completely different. So it was a bit of adjustment to try and fit in.
Describe the area, if you can remember well, where you grew up.
I grew up up here in Rochester, between Laval and Marmont, and from there up to Charlotte was all bush, and that's where us kids used to do our romping around in there, playing whatever and building tree houses and log houses and just what kids do at that time, give them an axe and whatnot, and they sort of made their own entertainment.
The fishing.
And the Millside Creek, there was fish in there at that time. We'd go down there fishing, which I don't know if there's any fish left in there anymore now, but
I think you got them all. What was the mix of your neighbourhood at the time growing up? Because I know Millardville, there was quite a substantial French presence.
There was. There was a French presence, and then the Fraser Mills part of it, they had a Chinese area and an East Indian area in the town site. And Millside School was the first time I'd ran into both races. I'd never had any association with East Indians or Chinese up to that point. And to this day, a good friend of mine who's Chinese still lives in the area.
And were people readily sort of adopted into the mix in those days?
Yes, there wasn't too much problems. Some of the older people couldn't speak English. Of course, I don't think that created much of a problem. As with the children, the French children, of course, we didn't have too much to do with them because they had their own school. It wasn't until, and I believe I was in grade 10 at the time, that the Fatima school up here, the teachers went on strike, and all the French students moved up to Como Lake High, and at which time overcrowded the school and we had to do shift work.
Oh my goodness.
So the younger kids, grade 7 to grade 10, would do the afternoon shift, and the grade 10 to grade 12 did the morning shift, which I was in, and then we'd spend the afternoon going to Queen's Park ice skating, or if the dikes around Essendale were frozen, we'd do our outside skating down there, or skating up at Como Lake, which at that time it seemed like we used to get a lot of ice skating in. The weather has certainly warmed up a lot since then.
I was going to mention that because you've mentioned that a few times, and we certainly don't have temperatures to that degree anymore.
No, not anymore.
No. Can you tell me what your house was like that you lived in when you were growing up in Coquitlam?
It was, I'd say, an average type home for the time.
How big was your home?
It had a living room, kitchen, and 2 bedrooms on the main floor and a bathroom. And then it had an upstairs which had 2 bedrooms. And it probably was one of the, I wouldn't say the larger houses, because at that time some of the French families were quite large, so there were some fairly large homes in the French area.
What about the neighbourhood in general? Did people tend to socialise together? Were people friendly and mixing together? And
yeah, I can't experience any problems. We all had our little conflicts here and there, back and forth, but nothing really serious. No.
No, I'm just thinking that.
And all our homes when I say all our homes, specifically our home, we never locked the doors. Everything was always unlocked. There was no thievery to any degree at that time. Everything was pretty safe.
Marlene?
Well, I was just going to say, when I came into the picture that was 1959, I guess, when we first started going out together.
Right.
And his mom and dad's house, we built our home 1 block away from his mom and dad's.
Okay.
And again, like he said, it was all bush area. It was just a couple of houses.
Yes.
Whereas now it's, well, there's no empty lots, let's put it that way.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, of course. It's certainly changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
Yes. When you were growing up, did you have any chores to do at home? Did you?
Oh,
were
yeah.
expected to pitch in?
Oh, yes. Yes, there was, of course, at that time we had a wood furnace, and so the wood trucks used to come along in the summer, and of course it all had to be piled to dry. And then as fall came along, it all had to be thrown through the window into the basement for winter use. Some people use sawdust, some coal. Not too much coal, mostly sawdust and wood. So that was always a job I detested. Was when the field trucks came. And then I had the paper route, which at that time was a fair chunk to go. It was over in Dawes Hill. So the paper shack was up here in Alderson and Nelson. And so it was a route over up Dawes Hill. And then on the way home, I'd go back up Mundy Road, down Austin, back down Marmot, and over to Rochester where we lived. So it was a fairly long paper route.
Yes, absolutely. And did you receive an allowance when you were growing up?
No allowance. It was, I can't recall ever getting an allowance. Right. It was always work of some form that you got paid for maybe, but not an allowance.
Right. You mentioned the sawdust for the fires. Was that a common practice then for people to use the sawdust?
Yes, it was, because natural gas hadn't come in yet, and so it was always a fuel source had to be wood, either in block form or sawdust form, or somewhat had to be wood.
And this all came from the local?
It came from Fraser Mills.
So you've mentioned that your neighbourhood was obviously very safe because nobody locked their doors.
No.
So that was obviously really nice. What about, do you remember where the police station might have been? Or?
The police station was right down here beside the city hall, or part of the city hall, on the corner of Burnett and Marmont.
Okay, and you, I think, already mentioned that the fire hall was
Fire
on
was
Brunette.
next door, yes.
Okay. Do you recall any major fires when you were growing up here?
I can't recall major ones, but although every time we heard the fire truck, we'd all climb on our bicycles and try and follow the fire truck to see where the fire was.
Of course. How did people manage when somebody got injured or were taken ill? What happened under those circumstances?
Well, we had the Royal Columbian Hospital, and I guess everybody sort of got wheeled there in some fashion or another. Okay. And there was, as far as shopping goes, I know my parents, so there was a Safeway in Westminster, so there was once a week was shopping day, and that would be down Westminster, because there wasn't much for shopping in the area other than the confectionery, small little stores, mom and pop efforts, but there wasn't anything very big.
Okay.
Wasn't there a grocery store too, just down here with Sam's Theater, and wasn't there some kind of Super Value or something?
No.
Not a Super Value.
The only store was Thrifts down here, down the street here a bit.
Yeah, that's right.
And over that side was the dentist and the doctor's office on Lougheed and Burnett.
So what
And
was
Sam's theater, movie theater.
Was that in Coquitlam? Or?
Yes, yes, right between the Jubilee, or they keep changing the name. Now it's the French Quarter and the Woods Hotel. Yes. That's where the theater was.
Oh, okay.
And I think later on they
Was a
put a bowling alley in there. I don't think, remember if it was the same structure or not, but they put a bowling alley in there. And yeah, that was our entertainment, was once a week was going to the theater, Sam's Theater.
Okay. Do you remember anything standing out from you in those days about going to the theater?
Not really, but I think admittance was 15 cents, if I remember correctly. That was Saturday matinee, of course. It was more in the evenings, but no, I can't recall too much other than the theater.
Okay. Was there a favorite spot to gather in when you were growing up?
Well, Blue Mountain Park, I suppose. That's where I learned to swim. They had a circular pool there. And of course, they had their weekly baseball games, which some of us would always be behind the backstop, retrieving balls that got fouled up. And we'd receive 10 cents a ball for retrieving them. Other than that, it's
Parks Cafe?
Parks Cafe. No, I was too young for Parks. I didn't go there. Bicycle paper routes all week, and then come Sunday, we'd climb on our bikes and go the Port Coquitlam route, or over to Wally, across the Petula Bridge. So I guess we didn't get enough bicycling on the paper route.
So you were quite mobile on your bikes. You weren't afraid to travel distance, obviously.
No, I traveled a lot of miles on bicycles.
Speaking of transport, what do you remember most significantly about the means of transport that people had?
Well, we had two systems going. One was Columbia Stage Lines that went from Dawes Hill to Westminster on the top route, which you had to walk up to Austin to get that one, but I think it only ran every 2 hours. And the other system was to walk down to Burnett, and there was a bus stop right at the corner over here at Marmont and Burnett, and we get on the bus and go into Westminster that way. And the bus used to come out of Fraser Mills. That's where they turned around and come out, and then it went across Burnett Creek, and on the left-hand side, and I guess the right as well, there was Swift's packing plant. And that place always had high fumes when we passed there. Everybody sort of held their nose.
And that was a
Packing, Swift's packing house. That's where they processed animals there.
Oh, all right, okay. Yes. Did people generally own cars then, or was that more uncommon?
The which?
Cars, did people drive cars then?
Yes, yes, a lot of people had cars, yes. Of course, being out in the area out here, you pretty well needed some kind of transportation. Not everybody had cars, but it seemed like the ones who didn't have cars always seemed to hitch a ride to work down Fraser Mills with somebody else. And how they got their businesses done in other ways must have walked up and got the bus. It's the only thing I can imagine.
I'm just wondering about the role that the city played back then for things like the services they provided, whether it was removing snow or.
Yeah, they had they were, but they only had one grader at the time. That's what they used for snow removal. They weren't using sanding trucks or anything like that at that time. It was just a grader. They would grade the main roads. The rest, well, you sort of had to battle your way through them.
Right. Yes. Okay. And when you were talking about the stores that were in the area, the smaller stores or shops, was there an ethnic mix with the stores in the neighborhoods that you?
No, there wasn't. Other than. They're all Caucasian, put it that way. There could be a mix of different nationalities, but they're all Caucasians. There was very few Orientals at that time.
So in the neighborhood that you lived in, were there like local drugstores and local pharmacies and local?
Yes, there was a pharmacy up on Austin Road, Austin and Marmont. There was a hardware store at Ridgeway and Nelson, and there was a food store there as well. Later years, there was a confectionery on Austin and Nelson, and between Nelson and Marmot, there was a food locker, a meat store and a food locker, frozen food locker.
There was quite a variety of things.
There was another mixed hardware store and food store at Marmot and Austin.
And a luxury freeze, it was there too, wasn't it?
That might have been later years. I'm sort of thinking back when I was still pedaling around my bicycle.
Okay.
Did you have a car when you were growing up?
Yes, I was one of the fortunate ones of the money that I was making down at Fraser Mills to buy a car at grade 11. With a lot of arguments with my father over that one. That was.
So tell me about your first car.
It was a 1946 Ford.
Mm. And how much did that cost you?
I believe I paid around $450 or $75 for it.
Was there a driver's test then?
Yes. It was quite simple. If you could go around the block a few times and be able to parallel park, that was about all is required. And start on a hill, that was another thing. That was another request.
Important, I would guess.
Start on a hill with no automatics then.
No, certainly not. Where was the gas station?
There was a gas station on Nelson and Austin, a Chevron gas station. That was the only, and down here, Shell's Trottier at Marmot and Burnett. Then there was a.
What about Bert's dad's?
That was later.
Can you remember how much a gallon of gas cost?
I think it was around 35 cents. Later years, when I was 18, 19, I was working in a Chevron station on North Road, pumping gas, and by that time it had gone up to, I think it was 40 cents for regular per gallon and 42 cents for premium.
We'd be very happy with that now, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So when you went out for a drive in your car, where would you go?
It was mostly down Westminster, the White Spot and back.
And the arena.
Skating at the arena, Queen's Park Arena, yes, skating there.
Yeah. You didn't drive to work?
Yes, I did. When later years, when I had the car, I'd drive to work, yes.
Mm-hmm. What about going into town, into Vancouver? Was that something you did?
No, not until I started working in Vancouver later years. But, I guess in our cruising days, we all went through White Rock, Vancouver, everybody sort of knew the terrain pretty good for the Lower Mainland. Mm-hmm. Sunday, you'd climb in your car and maybe go up to Hope and back, and everybody'd chip in with gas. You'd fill the car up, chip, everybody put a buck in, and so you go for a Sunday drive.
Mm-hmm. It was a means of a pastime pretty much as well, getting out and about. Yeah, looking for girls. That's a pastime, I guess. Talking a little bit about religion, what do you remember about the churches or congregations in the area?
Not very good. I was brought up as a Catholic, but I fought the religion. My mother was Catholic, and she thought she was doing her duty by sending me down to the church, Laval Square. And of course, the mass were always in French, and I didn't understand French. And I rebelled something awful. And finally, my father, he being an atheist, finally stepped in and sided in with me at about 16 years old. And he says, if he doesn't want to go to church, why force him? So that ended my church days.
Do you remember the church being an important influence on the neighborhood?
It certainly was with the French people. Yes.
And did everyone know the local priest? Was that?
Well, you knew him by name, but not personally. It wasn't fond memories for me. That was for sure.
What about when you were growing up? Newspapers, things like that. What do you remember about?
Well, I delivered them. The Vancouver Sun. $1.25 is what I had to collect monthly, and I had a hard time at that with this area being mostly Fraser Mills workers. They got paid on the 7th and the 21st of each month, and I was supposed to have my paper money in by the 5th, and if I missed on the 7th. By one day, I was out of luck. I had to come back on the 23rd, because at that time the people, when they got the payday, they weren't home for the day the payday was. They would be in the pub, and that was their treat. And the following day, they'd already spent all their money for groceries, so I couldn't collect. So my mother had advanced me the money to pay my son bill, because I got a $1 discount if I got the money in early. And so then when I missed that first payday at the 7th, I had to try and get it at the 21st, and you had to be there right at the 21st, otherwise it was a sequence that replayed itself.
So with your paper route, were there a lot of houses on your paper route?
I think I had a route of around somewhere around 45, 50 from the other side of Fraser, or Millside School, and all of Dawes Hill.
So you did a lot of climbing to
right
do.
Right up to Mundy Road.
Mm-hmm,
Yes.
mm-hmm. What about the radio? Did you listen to the radio much?
I personally didn't. My parents did. I didn't particularly listen to radio too much till I had a car with a radio in it. But no, I didn't pay too much to the radio.
Okay. Did you have any pets?
Yes, had a dog and a cat. Yeah.
Can you remember what they were called?
Yeah, the dog was Skippy, and the cat, I don't know what it was. We sort of inherited with the house when we moved out from Alberta. It was with the house, and I don't recall its name. But the dog came with us from Alberta.
What world events had the most impact on you when you were growing up?
Events?
Mm-hmm. Like the World War, Second World War, Korean War?
Korean War. I remember listening to the radio reports on that, and probably it had some interest because one of Dad's cousins was in the Korean War, so maybe that helped the interest part of it. After that, events. Can't think of anything at the moment.
Were any of your grandparents involved in any of the
No.
Marlene,
what about you? What was your experience with that?
My dad was in the Navy.
Okay.
The Second World War.
Okay.
Yeah. And I recall some of that, my mom going back and forth from here to Halifax to see him before he went overseas, and there's bits and pieces, but my memory is not as good as Denis's, I just think it was.
Yeah.
But the Second World War and Korean War, because I had an uncle that went over to the Korean War.
Okay.
And something that sticks in my mind, but that's a long time, not a long time ago actually, is Kennedy when he died, and I remember that.
Of course.
Yeah.
What do you remember most about that?
I remember where I was, I remember the time of day.
Where were you?
We were married, and I was visiting my mom in the house, and I remember sitting there and us turning the radio on and hearing it, and it made a big impact.
Okay. Why do you think it had such an impact?
Probably because by that time I had started taking interest in politics. I thought he was a great man, you know, with a little bit that I did read about him. And I remember thinking how tragic it must have been, not just for the country, but for his family, you know, that kind of thing.
Well, I think the biggest thing was about just about
On
getting
being assassinated.
just about getting in the war with Russia,
Yeah.
which he.
Oh, yes, the Cold War, yeah. That's the other thing.
Where were you, Dennis? Do you remember?
Yes, I was working at the time in Vancouver, and I remember someone mentioning in the office that he got assassinated. But again, it was avoiding the Cold War with Russia when Russia was bringing all its armament into Cuba. That was a bit of a touchy one. That was close. So that was my recollection.
And when you go home, you start to think about all sorts of different things. When I'm talking like from here, but at the present time, it's not
So it was definitely being talked about in the community
Oh,
quite
yes,
a bit.
yes.
Yeah. You brought up some children in the Coquitlam area. Tell me a little bit about how maybe the area had changed by the time your children came along and were growing up compared to when you moved here.
Well, both of them went to a school. You went to Austin too, did you not go to Austin?
Well, it was called Como Lake High, or Austin Heights High at that time.
Yeah, yeah, and so our daughters went to the same school.
Coquitlam.
Oh, okay.
And then they also went to, well, no, actually, they didn't go to Como Lake. They went to Millard, that's right.
Okay.
Because we thought they might go to Como Lake, but they didn't. We lived on Medora Avenue, and so consequently, they wanted to go to Como Lake because their friends were going to Como
Right.
Lake, but they wound up going to Millard.
Okay.
The way the area itself changed, well, definitely a lot more houses. As far as stores and that are concerned, by the time they came along, pretty well, Austin had the stores that are there now. You know, the smaller ones, there were different things going on in them, but similar. And the Safeway was there, the drugstore, that kind of thing. Both our girls had jobs. They got jobs after school. That was their thing. They did it themselves. I don't know what else I could say about them. I could go on, and I'm not going to, because we're very proud of them.
Of course, of course, of course. Were people still walking to school then?
Oh, yeah, well, actually, no. Lisa had a girlfriend that got a driver's license, and so she would come and pick up Lisa when they were going to Centennial.
Right.
And Melanie, she pretty well busted or walked to school.
Okay.
She went, again, that was like, they went to Baden Powell after they left Austin, they went to Lord Baden Powell.
Okay.
And they didn't take the bikes. What do we call them, riding their bikes to Baden Powell? You?
I don't know. Don't remember.
Were they at Centennial when the centenary happened?
I'm sorry?
The centenary at Centennial in, I think, 66?
Well, no, Lisa she was born in 66.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
Melanie was born in 69.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember that
No.
that year in Coquitlam?
Don't remember that at all.
Okay. All right. What about in general now? I mean, Coquitlam has changed hugely over the last couple of decades, actually. What would you say is the major change that stands out for you now when you look at Coquitlam now compared to what it was like when you were living here earlier on?
Well, it's a development. Like Fraser Mills got demolished, which was one time I understood that it employed 2,300 people. And now, of course, it's been demolished, and it was all being developed, and everything's getting developed. Everything's starting to lift out of the ground. High rises coming all over the place. When I was even when I was working at the service station on North Road, Lougheed Mall was not there yet. That was all bush. That's all. That's and apartments all around there. That's all things that came since my teenage years.
Oh, yeah, and you look at Coquitlam Center and Westwood Plateau and all that area.
That wasn't there.
Motorcycles up where the...
All that area, we used to put motorcycle runs in. It was all bush at that time.
And the population, the amount of people.
The only thing went up there was the power line from the Lougheed Highway. Well, not Lougheed and St. John's. There was nothing up there.
Right.
And I feel like it's gone too fast.
Yes.
You know, I think we miss when it was a little quieter. Let's put
Yes. Well, I guess it loses some of its intimacy
personality.
and personality, of course. Yes.
Because when you were asking about neighborhoods, when we were first married, the neighbors were all basically in the same age area, and they were all fairly new. And we used to have neighborhood parties. It was a weekly thing. Somebody would do this coffee clashes, whatever you want to call it. One of the girls would have coffee, and the rest of the neighbors would go over.
Yes.
It was, and you don't seem to see that as much anymore.
Right.
On the street that we live on, there still are some of the original neighbors.
Mm.
And that's unusual for
Yes.
this area, I believe.
Yes, it is.
And also our street, other than the fact we've got one house that's been torn down, the rest of them are the originals.
My goodness.
So that's another thing that we find.
That's 51 years.
Yeah.
So most of the mums were stay-at-home mums.
Yes. There were very few that weren't.
Right.
I was probably one of the few that did when and actually I didn't go back to work for 7 years. I went after I had my kids.
So that was definitely more unusual then than usual. Yeah, now it's nearly the opposite now. It's more unusual to be
people are
home.
working.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, and your kids could go outside and play, and you didn't worry about them as soon as it started to get dark, because you knew they were right in that area. And like Dennis said, we never worried about locking the house.
Yes, yeah.
And I didn't worry about the girls. You know, there was, and the neighbors watched out for one another. That was the other thing.
And you obviously felt very safe, and the children felt very safe.
Yes.
Yes. Certainly doesn't sound like there was a need for a block watch then, because you automatically did that probably.
And they did have a block watch, though. There wasn't.
Did they?
Yeah, when the girls got into their teens, I remember them having, there were block watches.
Okay.
But never, I don't think we ever needed it. And when I say we should say we didn't need it, but we never used it. Let's put it that way.
Right.
It was never
Right.
necessary.
So what are the major holidays that stand out for you as being celebrated throughout the year? What were the big ones for you?
Oh, Christmas was the main one.
Yeah. See.
That's when all the relations would get together for Christmas. It was a time for meetings or with a family.
How did Christmas then compare to Christmas as we have it now?
Well, I think family-wise, but still kept with the tradition. We have one daughter that lives in London. She comes home for Christmas every second year because she's married, so she's got to alternate. And the other one lives in Victoria, and they come over with their children. So I think the tradition has followed through.
What about dates like Remembrance Day? Was that something that you remember being
Remembrance Day,
recognised?
and we're actually quite involved with the Legion. We
Okay.
both volunteer.
Okay.
On the Ladies Auxiliary. And so Remembrance Day is a big thing.
But
Yes.
not when we were young.
But when we were younger, no. I mean, I remember it because of my dad,
Right.
you know, and he would make it a thing, but we didn't really do much
But
on
it
Remembrance
was
Day.
a holiday. That's what
Yeah.
we look forward to. being a
Yes.
holiday.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And parades, I'm assuming, on the holidays. Or were there?
I guess there were, but we didn't attend them.
Yes. Yeah.
The May Day parade is the one thing that,
The May Day parade was always up at Blue Mountain Park. That was sort of an attraction.
So tell me about the May Day parade.
well, for me, it was in Westminster.
Okay.
You know, when we were growing up, and that was a big deal. That was, and also I would go downtown. My grandmother had a store in Vancouver, and I would go down and watch the Pacific National Exhibition parade
Oh,
too.
okay.
That was a big thing.
Uh-huh. And what about Easter? Was Easter big
We
holiday?
celebrate Easter. Yeah, we have
Well,
Easter
again,
hunt
it was a
and,
get-together again with family
Yeah.
members.
Okay.
and we, well, going to Avon, things like that. That was a
Well,
issue.
yeah,
That was Easter.
Mm-hmm.
you got
And we skied, so we took, we went to Manning Park where the kids were growing up and the girls were growing up. We have always had a camper.
Okay.
And so we used to take off on Fridays and come back on Sundays. That was during the winter months. We did a lot of that.
Wow. Was it common for people to be skiing, say, in the 50s, 60s?
Not in the 50s too much. It was later on, I think, well, it was unless the parents took you up the mountain, you had a difficult time getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And the equipment wasn't very good at that time either.
What do you remember about the equipment?
Well, I had these wooden skis, which I believe with the harness and all probably came from T. Eaton's, and for around $10, I believe, and some shaggy boots. The equipment just wasn't cutting it. It was pretty bad.
And were there ski lessons for you, or you
No,
just
no,
made the
you
best
just
of it
sort of
yourself?
you just sort of climbed on and went straight down the hill, hope for the best.
So where was your preferred place to go to ski?
At that time, it was Seymour because you could drive up up there. So if someone would take you, well, you were lucky.
Mm-hmm. And Seymour, my guess is, was a bit of a jaunt for you then.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a
the
bit of a
first
distance.
time I was up at Seymour, the road ended where the TV tower is, and from then on you had a hike up to the lodge.
Mm.
So to single file through the snow, a walking distance, which I don't know how far it was. It seemed like a long ways at that time, but it must have been just about a mile between the tower and the lodge where it is now.
Did you go snowshoeing?
No.
No.
Not here, I didn't. I did a little in Alberta, but not here.
Okay. Have you any other thoughts that you would like to share about memories growing up here?
I'll probably think a lot of things over.
Do you leave? Yeah. It's been a good place to grow up in. It's, I mean, the area has been a good, I feel it has been. It was good for our kids. But both our girls, they figured Millardville or Coquitlam was, what would you call it, the suburbs? They're both downtown girls. They like the
Yeah.
activity. The one that's in London, I mean, Coquitlam, oh my God. You know, that's
What a boring place.
And the other one, Melanie, she's the one that has the children, and they prefer Victoria. She wouldn't live in Coquitlam either.
What was it most that you appreciated about growing up in Coquitlam, or raising a family in Coquitlam, perhaps?
God. The safety, I think we had, his parents lived very close by. It was nice having them there with us. We had some really good friends, and we still do, that still live in the area.
And I think what really got us into the area, the neighbors across from my parents' place divided up their property. And so the lady offered myself a good deal on a lot. And that was 19, it would be 19 what? We got married in 60, it would be 59. And I wasn't married yet, but I bought this lot. And eventually, 2 years later, I built on it. And we're still in the same place. I was a draftsman by trade, and I drew the plans. And the school at Como Lake High at that time was offering a very good course. In fact, it was the first one in BC, to my knowledge, with our vocational instructor, we were the first school to build a house every year in classes, which was auctioned off by the school board at the end of the season. So through that training, through the 2 years of grade 11 and grade 12, of working on the 2 years of houses building, I was able to build my own home. So it was a very good experience. And to this day, it's what I credit to put my foot on the ground that I was advanced over a lot of other people because I was able to build my house at quite a reduced rate from a bought house.
Wow.
It took me 2 years to build it, but I built it out of my pocket, so I never had a mortgage. So when we finally moved in, it was a clear title. And so I've never looked back since then. It's always been, I've had a very good life.
That's excellent.
Times I would have liked to have had a bigger house, but in retrospect, it's been fine. It's.
I had to talk her out of that. The kids are leaving the nest. Now she wants a bigger house. I couldn't quite see that point.
I'll tell you, when they all come home, everybody's out.
I bet.
Like this Christmas, we had 7 extra ones in there. It was a little, but it was fun.
Can you give a guess as to what your home cost you to build in 1961?
Yes. With the lot and the house, it was $14,000.
Oh my goodness. Which was probably a substantial amount of money then.
Oh, yeah. We lived off of 1 check. That was how we did it, basically, because I was working at the nurse at Riverview, and we banked yours and lived on mine, I think.
It was $14,000. $2,000 for the lot, $12,000 for the house, $14,000.
So that program that you referred to there, Denis, the school program,
Yes.
how long did that program run for? Have you a sense of that?
I don't know how long. I know Lester Pearson adapted that program as well. I'm sure a lot of other schools did too. And I don't know when they ended it. But our instructor, Mr. Rickard was his name, he was the one that was instrumental in starting that program up. And to me, it really paid off for me.
And you were in that program for 2 years?
Yes, the grade 11s would do all the minor work. When I say minor work, it was the brickwork for the fireplaces, doing the window sashes, and putting the shingles on, doing the wiring and the plumbing, and the grade 12s would be doing the main framing.
So that's quite a comprehensive experience for you all.
Yes.
And were you automatically all enrolled in that program, or it was an option for you?
No, it was some of us that didn't do so well in school thought we weren't, or myself particularly, we weren't university material.
Okay.
So it was a vocational program. So
Yes.
yeah, it's industrial art. So vocational program. So I enrolled in that, and I had I think there was 12 students of us that went through the program.
Well, it sounds nearly like what we would call an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
Of sorts.
Yes.
And that
A very
teacher
similar
left a
thing.
real mark on all of them. He was somebody I think that they'll probably all remember till they die.
And there's a few of my co-students. They also built their own homes through the same course.
Okay.
So it yes, I think it was very, very beneficial.
Okay. Great.
And I think it's great that he still has a lot of the fellows that he grew up with are still friends. They, over the years, they've, which I think that's the other thing, Coquitlam guys,
Yeah. And it sort of reflects back on the close-knit community that you've
That's
talked
right.
about
Yeah.
beforehand. Yeah. Have you any other comments that you'd like to make before we finish up?
Not really. I don't think so. I thought we should live in Richmond when we got married because my dad and mom offered us a lot down there too. But when I think back now, I think we probably made the right move doing what we did.
Denis?
We were lucky.
Yeah, no, I've been quite content with the area, that's for sure.
Sure as heck are, I can't move you.
too late now, you have to pack me out.
You just have to come in our house and see what has accumulated in 51
Yes.
years. Oy, oy, oy.
Person should move every so often to get rid of some of the,
Get attached to your
Right
things.
now, he's building an outhouse down in the basement because we have some property that needs a new outhouse. But the basement has been he does all his carpentry work down there.
Very
It's
good.
great for the dust and the rest of the place.
Yes, no doubt. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you both very much for sharing your memories, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
you're welcome. I could probably remember a lot of things down the
As soon as we
road.
walk
but-
out of here.